Hey guys, I'm Norb.
And I'm Mike.
And we are the Watchmen.
The men who watch.
If it's on a screen, we're watching it, talking about it, and sharing it with you guys.
This is a first ever Watchmen classic review. We are going back to 1957 and do a review of a famous film called The Bridge on the River Kwai.
So before we get into this, I'd just like to thank you guys, for those of you who are watching our show on YouTube. Thanks for your support. And to all of the podcast listeners out there, we appreciate your listening to our show as well. All right, Mike, let's get into this. This was a movie that neither of us had seen up until the decision that you and I should watch this movie, and let's talk about it. So it's brand new for both of us.
In my lifetime, there's those movies that are considered, the top 100 of all time classics, movies that every serious person of the film should see. And occasionally I've been talking to people and this movie has come up, and when I mentioned I haven't seen it, I've gotten looks like, how can you call yourself a filmmaker when you've not seen The Bridge on the River Kwai? And look, I do the best I can. I've seen a lot of movies, but I'm never going to see them all. But I thought this show would be a perfect show for us to start maybe seeing some of those films we haven't seen that we should see. And this was one that, after talking, neither of us had. So I thought, this is perfect. This is a perfect first one to see. The Bridge on the River Kwai came out in 1957, 12 years before I was born. And it won 7 Oscars, including Best Picture. So with that kind of stuff behind it, you kind of go into it thinking, I'm going to see this movie that is going to just blow my mind, because clearly it's considered one of the best ever. Was it? Well, we're going to talk about it.
Yeah, so I don't know if you have a little plot synopsis there, but my rough version of a plot synopsis is this is the story that takes place during World War II, and there are soldiers who are being held captive at a Japanese camp, and their job while being captured is to work and build this bridge over the River Kwai so that the Japanese will have trains that can pass over this particular river. And so this particular bunch of captive soldiers, it's their job to build this river, and it kind of talks about their struggle to build the bridge while facing a very tough Japanese commander, and at the same time another group of led by one man who escapes from the camp and leads a team to demolish the bridge. And that's kind of basically the gist of the story.
What's
in terms
funny
of what
is
happens.
I'd heard this title many times in my life, and all I thought was, well, I figure it's probably got a bridge in it, and I bet there's a river called Kwai, and I know Obi-Wan Kenobi's in it, and that's all I knew. And so watching it yesterday, I didn't know anything else. I had no idea it was about World War II or dealt with Japanese prison camps. That was all new to me, and it was. I enjoyed going into it really green. Yeah.
So I don't know how you want to start this one. This is, usually we have, I don't know, it's different. I guess this was a challenge to decide how I'm going to review this, because I feel like when you're talking about a classic, and especially one that is this old, I feel like you have to go about it with a different mindset, because you have to go about it thinking this movie was shot some almost 70 years ago, right? So my math is correct, 70 or 60 years ago. And that's a long time ago. And movies were made differently back then. The camera equipment was different. The way they scored music, the sound itself had a certain sound quality. It's very trebly.
Yep.
The music style was of a different era, and even the way they acted was different. So I feel like you can't take, you can't go into it with the expectations that you're going to see Saving Private Ryan and watch Bridge over River Kwai and compare the two. Otherwise, you will definitely have a skewed view on it. So I try to approach it thinking, okay, this is 1950. 1955 or whenever they made this film to release in 1957. So I try to keep that into account, when this was made in my review of it. How did you go about sort of coming up with an opinion and a take on your reaction to the film?
I'm not sure if I thought of it exactly in those terms, but I'm with you. What I did is I got my laptop out in front of me and I just took mad notes. I took 6 pages of notes as I was watching this movie, either notes of my reactions or notes of just me kind of reiterating what I felt was going on, just to really help me focus at listening to the dialogue and paying attention to everything. So I have a lot of notes, and at the end I wrote down my final thoughts and then also did some research on behind the scenes. I knew going into this movie it was 2 hours and 46 minutes long, so I was preparing for a long journey. I'm willing to start with just maybe how I felt at the beginning. So, and this is going to be a spoiler-full discussion. I'm sure many of you have not, if you haven't seen this movie, you might just enjoy listening to us talk about it and call it good. So, starting out, it begins with Alec Guinness, who played Obi-Wan Kenobi in Star Wars. He is a commander of a his British regiment of troops, and they have surrendered or are captured. And
Colonel Nicholson.
Yeah, Colonel Nicholson. They probably, I'd say, 60 troops. So they are marched into this camp, and there's the leader of the camp, a Japanese commander named Saito, and he gives them a talk about how you're here, we're going to make you build this bridge, and you're no longer soldiers, you're prisoners, but there's no guards. You're on an island, there's no escape. If you escape, you die. We have bugs, snakes, heat. You've got no choice but to be here and work, and be happy in your work. Big famous statement. And of course, Alec Guinness shows up as Nicholson, shows Saito the Articles of War from the Geneva trade talks and says, you have to treat us humanely. And right away he slaps him in the face, grabs his articles, throws it on the ground. So right there, I'm thinking this movie is going to be about a battle of wills, because Nicholson won't back down. So they toss him in the oven, which is a heat box, and don't give him any food. I don't frankly know how he's survived that at all, being in there for days.
It's like being in, what do you call it, solitary confinement. He's literally like just in this metal box that's barely the size that you can fit in, and it's out in the blazing sun without any food or anything. And I don't know how anybody could survive and not die of dehydration or heat exhaustion. But
so going that far into the movie, Norb, though, at that point in the movie, what did you think? I thought this whole movie is going to be about the two of them against each other.
Yeah, like who's going to give in, who's going to win this battle of wills, and show who's got the stronger fight. Because in the beginning, Alec Guinness is fighting everything. He refuses to send his officers to work. That was one of the rules of the Geneva Convention. The troops can work, but the officers cannot work. They can supervise, but they can't work. And General Saito is saying, all of you have to work, and he refuses to. And he almost guns them all down. I'm going to count to 3. If you don't send your officers to work, they're going to gun him down. And he doesn't. And he kind of he wins that little battle, but then he has to stand out there for hours and hours as punishment for not following the rules. But yeah, so it seemed like it was just going to be this battle of wills in this camp for a long time. And for a while, the story is that.
But it doesn't stay that way.
It changes.
It takes some pretty dramatic turns.
Pretty dramatic focus turns on. Yeah.
And that's actually probably my first critique of the movie was the way Saito changes. He has him in for dinner and tries to be nice to him. And I thought, this is just not what I was expecting this guy to do. This guy is relentless. He's ruthless. He's a tyrant. I mean, he's not even going to offer him some corned beef and whiskey. But then he does. But then he eventually says, if this bridge is not built by May 12th, I will be killed.
So he'll have to commit suicide.
Yeah. So you have got to help me. And of course, Nicholson kind of says, well, good luck with that. I actually chuckled a little bit at that moment. He's like, it's not my problem. But
I guess you'll have to kill yourself.
I guess you'll have to kill yourself.
When he was being nice to him, at first I thought, okay, he's clearly hasn't been able to sort of muscle him over. So I thought he was going to lure him in and try to sort of lull him into basically winning over his confidence by showering him with spoils and giving him wine and food, and then basically winning him over to his side, and then he would just do what he says. I thought maybe that's what he was trying to do, but he kind of still refused. He refused to eat any of the food. He didn't take in the wine. He kind of still, Alec Guinness still stayed, I'm not going to give this guy my, give him the benefit of
Well,
giving
and the whole
into his
source of the conflict
indulgence.
is Nicholson said, based on articles of war, that commanders and captains are not to do slave labor. They will be in charge of the troops doing the slave labor, but they're not to do it. But the general wanted everyone building the bridge. So that was the battle, is Nicholson refused to command his troops to work on the bridge until Saito would promise that the officers would not have to do the labor.
Yeah.
So
he kind of, he basically kind of won that battle. Eventually, Saito sort of just gave in, and he let the officers sort of.
And then all of a sudden it took a turn. Nicholson is like, we're going to build the best bridge we've ever built. This is important for morale. Everyone's going to feel good about this accomplishment. We're going to work together. And then becomes somewhat of a happy family where they're all happy. And
it's a little bit disturbing because some of the soldiers are thinking, why are we helping the Japanese make this really good bridge when we're helping the enemy succeed?
Right.
And so that's kind of the internal conflict within the camp. And then we haven't even talked about the other character played by William Holden, who's an American officer.
Yep.
In the beginning, he's an American officer, identified Shears as an officer, and he actually escapes from the camp. And his personality is sort of I'm not really with all this. My heart's not in this cause. I don't believe in all this honor. I just want to get out of here. I want to get with some women. I just want to party and get out of this place. So he escapes, and he kind of does that for a while. He's able to sort of break free and finds a place that actually takes him in, and he gets sort of, a little bit of a pleasure escape from all the war that he just had been exposed to. But then he's brought back in, and that's where his story,
blackmail.
He's forced to basically, they find out that he actually is faking being an officer. He'd stolen the uniform from a dead officer and pretended to be one, and was also faking it to be in the medical, area so he could get out of the labor. So he was kind of a cheater, sort of a slacker, and he got called on it. So basically they sent him to be part of this small group sent in to blow up the bridge. Well, so you got this.
Sorry.
Yeah. So there's kind of two storylines going on. You got Shears and the team that has to go demolish the bridge, and then you've got Alec Guinness, Colonel Nicholson building the bridge, and they have to build it by a certain date so that the train can make it through. So that's kind of the climactic build marches towards this moment of the bridge finishing on time, and can the demolition team get there and demolish the bridge before the train gets there? And that's kind of the countdown to the finale.
Well, and this leads into one of my biggest critiques of the film. And this has nothing to do with the time it was made. I know you talked about making sure you have the right hat on your head when you're watching this. But Shears, when he escapes, he floats downriver. He's rescued by some villagers that are kind, and they put a Hawaiian lei on him and some Hawaiian clothes and put him in a boat and let him sail away to safety. And I was like, okay, fine. And then all of a sudden, he's on a beach, a military hospital beach, with a beautiful woman romancing her. And I right there, I wrote in my notes, "Whoa!" exclamation point. And I wrote, this seems really out of place, because they'd set a tone of the movie of dark and not a pleasant film. I mean, this was about people not being treated good in war and being tortured and abused and what it means to be a prisoner. And this guy's now on this beach with this beautiful starlet, which is clearly probably a well-known actress from the day. But my notes are, this just seems so out of place. And what's interesting, Norb, is in my research afterwards, I found a paragraph that says, I will read, quote, Harry Kahn, the vulgar but successful man who ran Columbia Pictures at the time, was furious when he read the script and saw no love interest. He insisted that David Lean add a scene where Shears, the American played by William Holden, cozies up to a nurse. So I was right. It
was
felt
thrown
out
in
of
there
place,
just
and it
for-
was thrown in there to satisfy a Hollywood executive.
It did seem weird. It was like when we showed that scene, I thought, are we doing a flashback or something?
Yep.
Because it felt so like all of a sudden it's this beach movie and they were frolicking with a woman. It's like, what happened here? I get it. It could be part of his personality that, you know, because he was kind of this, you know, like I said, he was kind of a slacker. He wasn't like your military, you know, duty to the end kind of guy. But it was definitely a weird Twilight Zone shift to something where, did I miss something?
Yeah.
You know, are we jumping around in time or something? So
Well, and
that's
what that
interesting
told me is that some things don't change, because how many times do you listen to directors talk about studio executives meddling in their creative
mucking
works?
things up.
And again, that is the biggest thing, is studio executives, they don't just want to be executives. They all of a sudden decide they somehow have a sense of what a movie should be. And this executive clearly felt that when there was no love interest, the movie probably wouldn't sell or people wouldn't like it. But to me, that was the worst part of the film. And again, this won 7 Oscars.
She had no lasting relevance in the story. She had that little moment where they were kind of hanging out, and then she kind of pays him a visit, and then he leaves, and you never even hear her name mentioned again. I mean, it was just a flash of a quick appearance. Let's just throw that in there and have that little moment, and then they go on. I found it entertaining. I don't know, entertaining it sort of. I wasn't sure. I was also had mixed reactions. How, you know, they sent this elite, just like the elite SEAL team, right, to go out and blow up this bridge, but along they send like 4 Asian women. They look Filipino.
Who are very beautiful.
They're all very beautiful. They all look longingly at all these soldiers like they just want, you know, please take me with you when this is all done. And if they're not carrying Sherpa carrying stuff around, they're lathering up, bathing them, and doing all this stuff. And I'm
agree.
What is this? You know, these subservient women who are brought on, and they also look extremely attractive in it, but it totally fit. Again, I had to go 1957. You know, it's a different time. So that was a little bit weird to swallow.
But
just
that's
the way
why
they
the movie had
that.
such a contrast to it, because of those moments you're talking about, which I completely agree with you on. They felt contrived and artificially added to the story to boost other aspects of the film that really shouldn't have been there.
Yeah, it's like we need to add some sex appeal to this. We need to add some hot women, because nobody wants to look at dudes for 2 hours and 45 minutes. We need to add some women in there because some guys will get bored or whatever. So, yeah, that part I could have done without. You know, I agree with you on that part. So, yeah, so then the story, you know, leads to the climax, and what happens is, you know, they sneak in. They manage the team sneaks in. They wire the explosives all throughout the bottom of the bridge, and they're just waiting for the perfect time of the day to blow it up. But what happens is somehow the river the next day suddenly has dropped like 4 feet, which I was like, how did that suddenly just run out of water? How did this river suddenly just drop 4 feet? And now the wires are exposed, so they suddenly now their plan could be, you know, can be foiled. I didn't understand why that suddenly just happened, but this river suddenly is now dry, almost, you know, is dried to, you know, a much smaller percentage of what it was. The wires are exposed, and now there's this suspense as to will they get caught before the time to blow the explosive. And sure enough, Alec Guinness is walking around the bridge right before the train is supposed to get there, and he notices. He notices something's wrong. He's seeing these wires, and so he goes down there himself and to investigate. He brings the general with him, which makes a whole lot of sense. Let's bring the two most important guys in this whole thing to check it out myself. Don't send a couple of your soldiers to check it out. I'm going to walk there myself and check it out. And it leads to, you know, an eventual firefight where everybody's shooting and screaming and soldiers are running out, and he's trying to, you know, take it down himself, yank the cords out to, you know, cut it out. And the train is rounding the corner, so it's a big climactic finale. I don't want to do all the talking here, but you know, I definitely have some thoughts as it leads to the ending. But I don't know. Are you with me so far on this?
Yeah.
Or were you buying all this?
Well, you brought up the elite British demolition special forces group that went back in to blow up the bridge. And I don't know if you noticed this, but they were supposed to wire the bridge with explosives under cover of darkness, and it was clearly daytime when they were doing all the work, because I thought, well, they were at this remote location. They couldn't afford to bring in big lights to shoot it at night, so they shot it at day, and then they did
day for night.
They did the contrast, like try to darken. They had no fill light, and they darkened but it looked terrible. It was terrible.
It's clearly it was bright sunlight with it darkened down with a little blue hue. That's the day for night process.
So it took me out of the,
it was
whole part, and
again, these are those moments where I'm going, should I be critical of this, or is this just the limitations of what they had to work with back then? Because I had to still admire the fact that they really were at this location. It looked like these actors did have to stand and be out there in this blazing hot sun, and they built a real bridge out there with all these troops, lots of extras in there. So you have to kind of give them a lot of props for the production design being so real. They couldn't fake any of this. None of this was paintings. None of this was, you couldn't fake all this with graphics. So they had to build this stuff for real. But it was hard to get through there. It was like, this day for night stuff is really not working for me. But again, because we're so used to seeing what good night footage looks like. It's hard to go back. And back in the day, maybe they didn't know what that was. Maybe to them, this looked fine.
No, not true. Because remember, while they're arming the bridge, they cut back to the British troops under the command of Nicholson, who are celebrating and partying.
It is at night.
And that clearly was at night.
Yeah.
So they were obviously at a location where it was easier to get some lights in. But I'm sorry that I don't give them an excuse on that. I mean, you could get lights in. It might cost more money. You have to get generators. You can do it.
Didn't they get best cinematography for this show?
I didn't actually read all the.
Let's see.
All the awards, but probably.
I'm going to look at it while we're talking, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's one of them.
Well, and along one part of respect I have for the producer is I read that he was very adamant, and again, at the end, the bridge does blow up. You're going to get that payoff. The producer was adamant that he wanted to build a real bridge and blow it up, and not build a model of the bridge, a lower scale model, and blow it up on a Hollywood lot. His words were, if you don't do it real, authenticity will be lost. And I respect him for that. It's the same conversations we have today about CG versus real when it comes to scenes in movies. There's still that discussion. And clearly back then it wasn't about CG versus real. It was about models versus real.
Yeah. And I thought at first, maybe this is a model, but it didn't look like a model. It did look... like sometimes there's dead giveaways when things are models, even when they slow it down to make it look that way. It's the Godzilla effect, right? There's just certain things that let you know, that's a model. Big old splintering piece of something flies out in a way that doesn't look like it would, move if it were a real thing. But it looked real, and obviously that, confirms that. But it did win Best Cinematography, by the way. Jack Hildyard, Best Cinematography.
Let's just not pay attention to the day for night, which was probably
painful.
5 to 10% of the movie. But I think for me, Norb, I really liked how it was all barreling down to the climactic end. There was a lot happening. There was the guy at the detonation box. They're discovering the wire. The rest of the demolition unit is watching, and they want him to blow the bridge. They're waiting for the train. There's a lot happening, and I wasn't sure how it was going to end. I didn't know, and so I was in, and how it ended was not quite what I expected. I kept thinking that there's this whole backstory of this guy who's never really killed anyone, and he talks about how he's not sure if he can do it when the time comes. Well, he's the one on the detonation box, so he gets a knife out, and you think he's going to kill Nicholson because Nicholson is approaching the box, but instead he kills Saito.
Yep.
And I was like, okay. And I always like how back then they don't have even a sound of a knife slicing on someone's
neck.
It's
clean.
just a clean. There's no sound effects. They cut away from it. There's no violence at all. Today's times, this would have been, they would have shown you everything. And that's okay. Yeah. That's the kind of thing
That's the stuff I go, that's the 50s versus now. Yeah.
So go ahead.
So to continue on that scene. So he kills the Japanese guy. So then there's a kind of a wrestling match between the soldier and Alec Guinness.
Nicholson.
And Nicholson. And basically, obviously, someone's got to get to that plunging, the detonation, because that's the key. That's the one thing that has to happen for this all to work. And Nicholson's trying to stop it, and the other guy's trying to, fight Nicholson off, so he can detonate it. You've got Shears yelling, "Kill him!" And I have to admit, I agree that the part when everything's waiting, and he's on the bridge looking for everything, and he starts to notice the wires. That was very tense.
Yeah.
And they did so with no music. I was surprised they went with no music at all. If it was this day and age now, you hear the strings, bo, 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 bo. Instead it was totally quiet, just the sound of the ambience and footsteps walking around. I did find myself getting very tense on that part. So I give him credit. That was one of the best moments of the movie, was waiting to see what was going to happen once you realize, the gig's up. He's going to figure it out, and that just waiting to see what will happen when that time comes. So that part was very, very well done. So then there's that wrestling match. There's now bombs being sort of launched and blown up, bullets being sprayed around. The kid you referred to who didn't know if he could fight,
he gets shot,
and now it's just Nicholson. And he's free. He's free and clear to basically stop the entire bombing plan.
And then he falls on the detonator.
Well, but before that, though, he has a moment of self-realization. All of a sudden, he looks around and he sees the bridge, and he has this moment. He goes, "What have I done?"
Yep, famous line.
And suddenly he regrets, or it hits him that he's done all this stuff and this pride in building this bridge, and only now realizing that he's done, he's helped the enemy and not, and has done a bad thing here. But then he gets shot.
Actually, it looks like a shrapnel, there's an
maybe it was a bomb explosion.
I think the shrapnel hits him from the bomb, the grenade, and then he falls.
You're thinking he's not going to be able to stop it. He has this realization, but now he's dead. He's not going to be able to stop it. And then he falls onto the plunger, and then the whole bridge glows, and then the train comes down. A very cool climactic finale.
Well, you know what that actually took me to was Star Trek III, The Search for Spock. The moment that Captain Kirk decides to self-destruct the Enterprise, and they beam down to the planet, and he looks at the Enterprise like a shooting star going down in flames, he says, "What have I done?" And I thought that must have been taken from Bridge on the River Kwai.
That's true. That's a good point. That's a little different. I thought it was kind of. I kind of laughed out loud when he fell on the thing, though.
It was a goofy fall.
It was a goofy fall, and he wasn't even really that close to it. And all of a sudden, he's on top of it, putting the plunger down. I would have rather him just maybe crawled to it and at the last second pulled it down before he died. But the falling on it was a little comical for me. It just took me out of the moment.
And the one last big line, clearly an important line, is the doctor from the camp who was at odds with Nicholson. He doesn't want to be a part of the bridge dedication, so he goes up on the hill to watch from a distance, and he sees everything, and he looks and he goes, Madness,
right?
Madness.
And I've read a lot of the notes and comments from people, and they talk about the whole theme. That sort of summarizes the theme of the movie. That war is madness. The movie was all about the madness you experience being in war, and the colonel went through his own madness, which is why he didn't even think about what have I done, because he went temporarily mad. That's what war brings out in people. And I could appreciate that theme. I didn't like the character switch. It felt too abrupt because Guinness was all in on this bridge and proud of it. And even the doctor character you were talking about was sort of mentioning that, why are we doing this? This is not a good thing. We're helping the Japanese. And so he's bringing it up. It's not like he doesn't have a clue. But at the end, somehow he gets hit by it and has this self-realization. I don't know. It was just so sudden. Why didn't all of a sudden then did he have this sudden wake-up moment? It just felt like a very abrupt. Well, he's about to die, so we got to make him feel like, okay, all's good because he realized what he'd done wrong, and now he can die properly. I don't know. It was too abrupt for me. It didn't seem real. I didn't buy that he just suddenly realized it right then.
And the movie started with a picture of a bird flying, and it ended with a picture of a bird flying, and I, of course, was thinking, what does this mean? What does this have to do with it? I'm sure the director would say, no, the bird means life. It means life.
It represents
how can you not see the art?
Escaping madness. The bird escaping the jungle is like the madness being set free in your mind.
Yep.
I don't know.
Deep.
There was a scene, I don't know if you caught it, but there was a part where there was some, I can't remember if it was gunfire or explosives, but all the bats.
Oh yeah, that was a lot of bats.
Were in the trees and they all start flying off. And didn't it look very much like the Indiana Jones bats?
It put the Indiana Jones Temple of Doom bats scene to shame, though.
Yeah, there's a lot more of them.
So many more. Yeah. It did.
But it looked like they went to the same place and said, let's shoot bats where they shot Bridge on River Kwai, because the lighting and the foliage looked exactly like what they shot in Indiana Jones. But it was like, whoa, that's Indiana Jones right there. They must have been inspired by Bridge on the River Kwai, which they probably said they would have been. So I guess so in the end, which is very different from happy Hollywood endings, both of our protagonists, actually everybody, the antagonist and the protagonist, both died. Alec Guinness dies, Shears dies, and the general dies. So really all the main characters...
The doctor lives.
Die. The doctor lives, and some of the other demolition team guys live, but the main characters who you've been with from the start, all died, which I thought was like, oh, okay, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Because, I always appreciate a movie that dares to go with a non-happy Hollywood ending. But all that said now, I guess we should wrap up our overall, did we like the film? And Mike, I'll cop out here and let you go first.
Okay.
You go first.
So, I liked the film. I'm glad I saw it. I think there were many aspects of it that were really good. The fact that this movie's 60 years old and I was pulled in, I was happy about that. It was shot CinemaScope, very widescreen. I really enjoyed that. I thought it looked good, except for the day for night part. But Alec Guinness gave a great performance as Nicholson. I enjoyed the film. Would I give it Best Picture? No way. I would not give it a Best Picture award. But again. Also, I remind myself that we're living in a time today where war is not on people's minds like it was back then, and war movies, there were a lot of them, and I think they dealt with how people were feeling, and so maybe it made people feel something, positive about all the horrors of war that were happening at the time, and maybe that's why it got Best Picture. I can't say I know what it was up against either,
right?
But it was a good movie, and I'm glad I saw it. I just don't think a Best Picture to me should be a movie that is flawless, in my opinion. And this movie had some flaws. And put aside the day for night, the biggest flaw is that ridiculous scene with the woman on the beach. That completely took me out. And as I found out, it was artificially planted. And right there, to me, that's not a flawless movie. It's got a flaw. So
right.
That's my quick little synopsis. How about you?
I would probably have to say I also am glad I watched it. Now, to say that I liked it, I liked parts of it.
Yeah.
I appreciate it, and I think I just have to say my appreciation is greater than my liking of it. Because as I said, it's hard to compare where your mind is at and what you're used to now to put yourself into. This movie came out, and probably, I don't know how many movies of this type were made at that time. And it's possible maybe this was one of the most, maybe war movies hadn't been done like this before. And if you're pushing the envelope at that time, you have to put your mindset thinking that maybe they hadn't seen anything quite this gritty before in terms of that depiction of a war movie like that. So it was hard to get past some of the technical elements, the day for night. The music won an Oscar for Best Music, and the music is sometimes laughable to me, but that's because it has that sound of like something will happen, it's like totally silent. Music back then, it seemed like they were very minimal.
Yeah.
They'd not have it for long stretches, and then something will happen, and all of a sudden, brah, 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 and it's got that sound that's very much 50s-ish, and it's a little jolting, and it's a little bit, it feels campy, but that's because we're watching it 60 years later. So it's hard to undo that stuff and not think and let that be distracting, because we're talking about, this is a best picture, won best cinematography, best editing, best music, and yet I find lots of flaws and distractions from how those things are working as they work for me. So those are hard to say, would I give these awards? You'd have to be able to say, I know what these, like you said, what were they up against and what had been seen up to that point to give it that feeling that now I see why this movie was given that, and I don't have the proper context to do that. But the things I do appreciate is I thought they did a great job with the early depiction of the camp, the characters. I thought the actors did a great job. Alec Guinness was wonderful to hear him, as a younger actor.
Yeah. He's got that
before
Obi-Wan Kenobi voice, and
he's Obi-Wan, but he's like good-looking young Obi-Wan, you know. And I thought they did a good job of creating that dynamic within the camp. The evil, Japanese commander and that battle. I thought all that was very, very well done. And the suspense at the end with the build up and lead up to the end, I really did like those parts of it. Some of the middle was where it felt kind of like you said, a little disconnect and out of the film. I had to reconnect and kind of get back into, okay, where is this going? Okay, I see now. We're back onto a mission. We're bringing our main character back. It's all going to come down to this bridge. So the middle part is definitely where things got lost a bit. But I do appreciate the production design, the extras, the sets, what they had to do to shoot on location and build this actual thing. And all those aspects are, given the context of especially shooting back in the 1950s, I know that couldn't have been easy. So, those are the things I do appreciate, the efforts they had to make that film possible. So I'm glad I saw it. Now I know. So if everyone ever mentions Bridge on the River Kwai, now it won't be this, I need to go see that sometime, And on another note, it was fun to finally see the movie where that song is quite pronounced throughout that show, and I guess the name of that song is the Colonel Bogey March.
Did you know that's from 1917?
What do you mean?
That was not made for the movie. That was created in 1917 in World War I. It was a song that they used to sing in World War I, so they used it in this movie. They used it there. Okay, it was not created for the movie.
Okay, not created for it, but obviously made popular within that film. So it was fun to hear it in a cinematic context in the film. So
and the reason they whistled the song instead of sang it, because the lyrics are actually very not politically correct. They've got a lot of bad language in them. They're really against Hitler, saying he's only got one ball, and they get into kind of they felt that would not work for this PG movie. So instead of them sing it, they just decided they would all just whistle it. So the whistling was on purpose because the lyrics are not appropriate.
That was kind of cool, though. I liked how it worked. And it was sort of, the way I took that as in the beginning, it was almost like their way of sort of defying their Japanese captors, because it's like, well, you can make us work and do all this stuff, but we're going to march and we're going to sing our tune and keep lifting our spirits up. It was kind of their way of keeping some sanity during the madness that is, being a prisoner of war.
So the philosophical effect on me from this movie that I think was the most profound is that it made me think a lot about, and I think many actors go through this, and I think we all go through this, is how do we want to be remembered when we're gone? Because it's well known that Alec Guinness was very unhappy that people only think of him as Obi-Wan Kenobi. That's not how he wanted to be remembered. He wanted to be remembered as Colonel Nicholson, that type of character, a serious Oscar-winning role that was dramatic and involved all kinds of range. And what I also read is that Alec Guinness was not the first choice to be in this film because he was a comedy actor and was only known for comedies. So what's mind-blowing is that he was not the pick for this movie because a lot of people weren't convinced he could be serious. So this is a guy who through his career went from comedy to dramatic to Obi-Wan Kenobi. And he's not happy that that's how he was remembered. And it made me think that I know a lot of actors go through this, is how are they going to be remembered? Some actors do comedy and then they're known as funny and they try to go serious. And then some actors go serious and try to go funny. And I think what I take from this movie is I think we all can think about how do we want to be remembered? I mean, at this point, I think where I'm going in my life, I'm going to probably be remembered for this show. The rest of my life is still yet to be written, so I don't know what I have yet to do. But I think that is a thing that haunts everyone, is when you're gone, will you be remembered? And if so, how? And it is just well known that Alec Guinness, nobody knows him as anything but Obi-Wan Kenobi these days. So I don't know what you think about that, but that was the deep philosophical kind of lesson I got out of this movie is how do you want to be remembered? Because everyone who made this movie is gone. Yeah, right. That's true. And that cycle just kind of keeps continuing, right? As more and more of our heroes and icons we grew up with. In fact, I think tonight there's a show about Prince. There's like a dedication show that's going to be about Prince, and he was such a big music, influence on me growing up during that time of my life when I was just discovering, music in the 80s. And he's been gone for a while. Michael Jackson, same thing, and all these guys are, they're being remembered for different things, but they all share that thing in common, whereas they contributed something, a lasting legacy to the world. And what is our lasting legacy going to be? Hopefully the show will be something big enough and grow into something where it can have a lasting legacy. We'll see. Obviously for me, being a big Seahawks fan, as you can tell, that's been a big part of what I've been, contributing to the world. But, I don't know. What is yet to be written? What would our kids' legacy be? And we did make a movie that will always be in the history of cinema, which is our movie. Someday we'll talk about the movie, our horror movie called Frayed, which we will someday do an entire section about, a show about, talking about. That might be a 2-part show, but that's something that will always be part of the cinematic landscape. But which is why I don't want to be too critical, especially of these older shows, because you do have to take into account context of when these things were created. The further back you go, the more crude these films will appear. You go from the 50s to the 40s, 30s, 20s to movies without sound. They all had to start somewhere, and yet these were pioneers at the time. We talk about Georges Méliès, who was the depicted French filmmaker in the movie Hugo. And his stuff was just crude and raw, what he was doing, but he was one of the first to pioneer special effects, on celluloid film. And those images are timeless and represent a change in what cinema eventually evolved to. It's like part of the birth of cinema. So everything that is part of what we watch now is, it's all evolving. But I guess what's fun to watch about these is it can also make you appreciate where we are now, because movies and everything is so technically amazing when you think about it. The sound design, the music, the visuals, almost anything is possible. But it still comes down to you have to have the core parts that make a film great, and that's the story. You have to have the story, the script, and you have to have the characters. Everything else is sort of window dressing. And if that stuff isn't solid, it doesn't matter how great technically a movie is. That's where things fall apart. So, I look forward to watching more movies, classics like this that we haven't seen yet, and watching those and, learning a little bit more about some of the things that we have yet to appreciate. Well, respect to the filmmakers. One thing I read is that we take for granted these days whenever we film something, we just play it right back.
Yeah.
They actually had to fly the film reels to London on plane and have them processed and then flown back before they could watch anything they'd shot to make sure they hadn't missed anything.
Yeah.
Talk about a process. I mean, that would take days. Days, just to even look at what you filmed. So in the meantime, you just keep going and wait for them to come back, and then you watch that. Boy, I mean, that's a different way of having to work back then.
Well, and even just the editing, a whole other discussion topic. But you notice they have a lot of dissolves in those shows.
Yeah.
And back then, you could tell the dissolves it was an optical process.
Yeah.
If you wanted to dissolve a shot from the next, you had to basically take that film, overlay the other film, and then process that as a separate shot. Then you stick it in, and you can clearly see as soon as the dissolve starts, there's this jump, and then it fades, and we're back to the original cut. And it's just kind of what it was. It's just how things were. And, again, we take for granted how it is, but that's just a part you have to accept, that's the limitations of what they had to work with back then. So,
but I stand behind my biggest critique of why this film I don't think deserved Best Picture because of that ridiculous scene in the center. And the way I'll do a comparison is Braveheart won 13 Oscars. Definitely, I know, one of your favorite movies of all time. Imagine in the middle of Braveheart if William Wallace or one of his friends had escaped a battle, and the next shot is he's frolicking on the beach with some pretty woman drinking cocktails and forgetting about everything he was involved in. Imagine that in the middle of Braveheart. That's my point.
It was. It felt like an Annette Funicello beach party movie.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, it was just so strange.
And as it turns out, it was
a meddling executive who wanted to tweak things.
So,
but yeah, it would have been interesting what that movie would have been like had they not made that scene. It probably would have been shorter by a good 10 or 15 minutes or something. But
it was completely unnecessary.
Yeah, it was unnecessary.
As we found out, it was unnecessary from the get-go. But that's just why, for me, when it comes to defending as a Best Picture, it wasn't. Best Picture should be flawless. And that was a big flaw.
And technical side, if you're just going on Best Picture or Best Directing, you can then just focus on characters, script, and story.
Yeah.
And you can remove the technology if you just focus on those things. And does the story and the characters, do they hold up? And if they do, that can, rise above any of the technical limitations and should hold, to what really, represents what that film is all about. And there was definitely some parts that wasn't crazy about.
Madness.
In terms of this execution.
Madness.
That's what the director said when the executive came in. We need to put a girl scene in here. Just do it. Madness.
And that's where the director said, "What have I done?"
Yeah. Yeah. Still, it got Best Director and won all the awards, so I guess it wasn't all that bad.
So for the surprise, it's just fitting to share this. This is the copy of the movie that we watched. So I have the collector's edition of this. I've had it for a while because I wanted to see it. And what's neat about this is inside, there's the actual cover. So there you can see the three main characters. And on the back, there's the Love Annette Funicello beach party scene right on the back. Make sure that we're selling this romance part of the movie. And I do like inside, there's a neat... they have another book with many pictures and posters from the movie, which I liked a lot. And inside, there's also, they had a bunch of cards that have scenes from the movie like that, which was cool. I like the promotional materials. I thought that was neat. So that is the surprise for the show. And this, again, completes our first classic review. And I would definitely like to do more. If anything, just it's good for us to see some of these movies that we have missed.
And I hope as hopefully our show continues to gain an audience, I would love to hear from those of you who are watching this and have responses to our critiques. It's just our opinions, but obviously we'd love to hear if you guys have a completely different opinion, or if you agree with us or think we're completely out of left field with our takes on things. It would be great to hear what you guys think of our.
Yeah, tell us the
our
true meaning
thoughts.
of that bird flying at the beginning and the end of the movie. So we understand.
But we'd love to hear from you. And if you have any other ideas for future movies, future classic movies, future shows or games that you'd like us to talk about, we'd love to hear from you guys. So for now, I'm Norb.
And I'm Mike.
And we are The Watchmen.
Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.
Thanks for watching The Watchmen.
Please click on here to watch other episodes, and be sure to hit that like button too.
And please subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll always be alerted to any future episodes.
It really helps us out, and we appreciate it.
We'll see you next time. And remember, we'll be watching.